You know, some marmalades get some of their tang from added flavoring. While Robertson's Golden Shred gets all of its tang from Seville oranges. What would you rather have for breakfast?
No one under 16 will be admitted unless accompanied by a parent or guardian. Only you can judge if your children are mature and intelligent enough to witness the frank and revealing scenes in this film.
90 minutes past 10 o'clock, that's Loving on next, and I think Gladys Knight and the Fifth. Have you had a good Saturday? Oh, you don't sound too enthusiastic tonight. We'll have to do a little bit better than that. Anyway, it's 20 minutes past 10 o'clock. Welcome on to downtown for a Saturday night call until 2 tomorrow morning. As you know, on Saturday through until Sunday, we always have 4 hours of downtown.
In the end of 1970s England, the country had been in a recession, and Liverpool and its surrounding areas had been hit especially hard. High unemployment, race riots, but with the dawn of the 80s, things were starting to look up. With new businesses coming to the area, affordable housing planned, there seemed to be a positive feeling in the air. That mixed with the fact that children were on summer vacation from an educational system that many felt were draconian and outdated, harking back to Victorian times, even inspiring the rock group Pink Floyd to write another brick in the wall. So let's put it this way, the kids were enjoying their break. And I guess it was the last of the glory days where you could leave your kids unattended and feel they're safe. Such is the case of one Johnny Greenwood and Gary Miller. The two best friends were inseparable. If you saw one, you knew the other was close behind somewhere. And they were good kids. Well, as much as any 11-year-old boys could be good kids. But little did their parents know as they set out early on a Saturday morning to meet up and have a day of adventure, that things would never be the same again, because Johnny and Gary's death clocks were not ticking.
First tonight, they were the 11-year-old best friends who went out to play from their homes on Merseyside, and they never came back. No one has been convicted of the murders of John Greenwood and Gary Miller.
Johnny Greenwood and Gary Miller's movements on that Saturday, August 16th, after leaving home in the early morning, are sporadic and unclear, with different witnesses' accounts often conflicting, with several witnesses saying the boys had been seen heading towards the main shopping area and then hanging out in front of a pub before moving on. It was also reported that they'd been spotted talking to a couple of older male teenagers, but they have never been identified. It was somewhere around noon that the two were seen headed towards the entrance of a rubbish tip, or dump, climbing through a hole in the fence, a popular area frequented by kids, hoping to find something of value that they can pawn or keep for themselves. was around 5 o'clock that a man in the rubbish dump went to investigate his dog, scratching at an old mattress. When he lifted the mattress, there was a hand poking up through the garbage and dirt. Shifting the garbage, he found what he believed to be 2 young boys. And unbelievably, their faces were missing, like they'd been torn off. But in the cavity of the smashed teeth and blood and guts, they could see tiny bubbles. Remarkably, the 2 children were breathing. Running to the nearest house, he called an ambulance. When both attendants arrived, they testified that they were shocked by the brutality of the crime and that the victims had no faces. When the best friends didn't return home for dinner, the parents phoned the police, and they were alerted to the fact that it could be their 2 children now fighting for their lives. Every parent's worst nightmare. But why? They were just kids. Who'd want to hurt a kid, much less try to kill him? And as the crime made the news of the young boys fighting for their lives, several people came forward, saying that they'd seen the neighborhood simpleton acting strange and suspicious, and then running away from the crime scene. The simpleton was one 20-year-old John Cheeseman. And yeah, I know what you're thinking, but apparently he wasn't born into it, and he suffered a severe head injury as a child, where he became simple, and he instantly admitted the whole thing to the cops. But I guess that didn't matter too much to the 2 boys, because Johnny Greenwood passed away that very next day. And Gary Miller 4 days later, without either one of them regaining consciousness. Apparently they couldn't pump the blood into them as fast as it were leaking out. But doctors saying that if they had survived with the damage to their brain, they would have ended up as simple as the man who'd confessed to killing them. But was he their attacker? Several witnesses saw a man in the area that didn't fit Cheeseman's description, also attacking children. What are the odds that there were 2 retards in the area roaming free? And once Cheeseman had lawyered up, he proclaimed his innocence, with his lawyer complaining you can't interview a mental defect without legal representation. I guess Cheeseman wasn't crackers after all. And although the case went to court, it was quickly thrown out, and they turned the half-wit loose. And the families were devastated, knowing there were a possibility they may never know what happened to the 2 boys. But it was in 2016 that the police found new evidence that they believed could convict Cheeseman. But because of a double jeopardy law set in Victorian times, they're unable to interview, much less charge the man. And he now roams free, doing whatever mental defects do when they're roaming. It's interesting to note, no murder weapon has ever been found, and the case has now gone cold.
A young woman was savagely raped, murdered, and mutilated again.
When it comes to white guilt, white shame, white privilege, or whatever fancy-smancy term you want to give it, well, pray tell, I'd say it's been around as long as we have. In fact, I don't reckon there has been a time where the white man hasn't been crossing the seas over somewheres to save the savage of his sins. And while God has always been hardest on the poor, and we're just trying to feed ourselves, the rich, well, I guess they got time on their hands, and they need to be saving someone. Case in point. It was September 1988 when Julie Ward, the daughter of a wealthy English businessman, had been in Kenya for 7 weeks, working as a photographer's assistant for a wildlife magazine. A job that you only get when you come from a wealthy family. I mean, let's be honest, most people are still working in supermarkets, bagging groceries. The 26-year-old was traveling with a group of thrill seekers at the Masai Mara nature reserve, with the group eventually thinning out, leaving just her, a guide, and her companion, an Australian named Dr. Glenn Burns. It was on September 5th that their vehicle broke down, and Burns, along with their guide, went into the city to find someone to repair it, while Ward returned to their accommodation alone. was on September 6th that the vehicle was repaired, that Julie set out from her 5-star accommodation and got her Jeep, and while she was waiting for Burns to return with some additional supplies, she went out into the bush to pick up some camping equipment they'd left there. And that was the last time that Julie Ward was ever seen alive. A week later, when she hadn't returned to England, the father came to Kenya and hired a plane looking for her over the expansive terrain, following the coordinates of her last known camping site. And it was there that he miraculously found his daughter, dismembered, including her head and both of her legs cut off. And they figured she was alive when they did it, and then she was set on fire. The grieving father contacted police, and Kenya's finest detectives were put on the case, who, after investigating, told the father that his daughter had been struck by lightning and eaten by lions, which you may assume is rare in those parts, but apparently not. The father, not willing to be satisfied with the shit sandwich that the Kenyan authorities were serving him, and with considerable resources, hired an ex-MI6 secret agent from the UK to come over and investigate his daughter's death. And after months of poking around and throwing money at the savages, they started getting results. But those answers weren't to anybody's liking. And those answers followed a trail all the way to the top. Meet the president of Kenya. Apparently as corrupt as he is black, and he had a playboy son who apparently likes pussy almost as much as he likes killing things. And although hunting lions and whatnot for sport is against the law in Kenya, I guess with connections you can get around it. And him and his buddies went out on a hunting expedition. And I guess after a hard day of killing things, they settled down for some brewskis, or yak's blood, or whatever those types do to get their rocks off. And they must have run into pretty Julie Ward, who I'm guessing told them that they shouldn't be killing wildlife. And I guess if killing lions satisfied one carnal urge, bumping into Julie was about to satisfy another. And the 16 of them got to it and gang raped her, filling in every one of her well-educated holes. And when they were done, they chopped off her legs, I guess so she couldn't run away.
If you chop somebody up like she was chopped up, there would be a lot of blood splattered around because the part keeps pumping and it splurts it out. There wasn't a great deal of blood here, not as would have been expected if...
And the poor father? Well, he never found out what they did with Julie's blood. And as for the president's son, no one was ever charged, and he still remains free to this day. Fort Worth, Texas. I guess some may lyrically wax it's the home of steers and queers. And if I'm being honest here, I don't care for either of those two if you don't mind. And I ain't asking. But if I have to choose, I'll pick a steer between two burger buns. But it's also the home of pretty little maids lined up in a row. Case in point, meet the Fort Worth trio. I'm guessing trio because there's 3 of them, and Fort Worth because that's where they're from. It was on the morning of December 23rd, just before noon, that the 3 girls set out to go Christmas shopping. The youngest, Julie Ann, asked if she could tag along with the older girls who lived on the same street, because she didn't want to be left at home, bored. Renee wanted to be back by 4 because she had a Christmas party with a boyfriend who'd just given her a promise ring, so she wanted to look real good. By all accounts, the girls had made it to the mall and were seen by multiple witnesses doing their shopping. But when they didn't return home at 6, the parents went to the mall and found the car abandoned in the Sears parking lot with the Christmas gifts still in the back seat. Worried that something terrible may have happened, they waited at the vehicle all night for the children to return. When they didn't, they went to the police in the morning. At first, the cops had figured the girls had run away. And as if to add credence to this theory, 17-year-old Rachel, who'd recently been married, her husband received a letter from her several days after they'd gone missing, saying they'd gone to Houston and where he could find the car.
The former Mary Rachel Arnold, 14-year-old Renee Wilson, and 9-year-old Julie Ann Mosele vanished December 23rd after telling their families they were going shopping. Their abandoned car was found that afternoon in a parking area of Seminary South Shopping Center. The next day, the only major lead in the case developed when a handwritten note was received stating the 3 had gone to Houston. Police weren't sure if the note had been written freely. It has since been sent to the FBI lab in Washington for analysis.
But no one believed that the 17-year-old wrote that letter to her husband. At least not under her own volition. There were too many discrepancies. First off, the letter was written in pen, and the envelope in pencil. And no young girls are gonna run away 2 days before Christmas.
Tuesday, a Justin man found some undergarments near a stream west of Justin, near Texas Highway 157. They were not there Christmas Day. But Renee Wilson's parents examined the clothing and determined it did not belong to the missing girls.
Some of our friends called us this morning and asked me if we'd heard about it on the news, and I told them no. So then we called down here and they told us we could come look at them.
What happened when you looked at the clothing?
They're not Renee's.
Half the city interviewed, thousands of police man-hours, rewards set, and theories aplenty, including a lesbian cult, a Tijuana prostitution ring. But either way, the girls had disappeared into thin air.
The girls have been missing now for 9 days. What are your feelings at this point?
There's something's happened to them. I know it. 'Cause it's just not like them. They wouldn't have just run off. Nobody heard nothing from them.
Well, 9 days ago, I thought maybe they had just went somewhere, but now I don't believe they have. I believe they've been picked up by somebody and been helped, and that they've been hurt or something.
You haven't given up hope, though?
No, no hope give up. Just want them to come on back home.
Meanwhile, police continue checking every possible lead. A reward fund has been established with the Forest Hill State Bank in an effort to prompt even more information. And the Wilsons say they will turn to a Dallas psychic for help. Mike Miller, Channel 8 News, Fort Worth.
A psychic told the girls' families that she believed that they had been murdered and their bodies could be found somewhere where they were drilling for oil. But being this was Texas, that weren't very helpful, so the families decided to hire a private detective. And he was able to find a witness from the day who said he'd seen the 3 girls being forced into a van by a security guard or what looked like a police officer. And he also found a pervert who worked in the same store as Rachel, who liked to call up girls and masturbate. And the pervert had even received a warning from the police to stay away from Rachel, but nothing came of it. It was in 1979 that this same detective phoned the families and told them that he thought he'd cracked the case and he needed to meet with them. And it was on the evening of that meeting that he committed suicide and ordered all his records be destroyed. So if he had any new information, he took it with him to the abyss. And now in Fort Worth, at every Christmas time, they talk about 3 girls who went out Christmas shopping and never returned.